I know some people have come across regular expressions before in other units, and some people won't have. So let's start by having a look at the RE, or regular expression library. Okay, so we're not going to go through that in detail, and you can have a look, read through there, and it describes the syntax. It describes some of these special characters. We'll use some of those so you can see how they work. The escape character, which is the backslash. Notice here that the square brackets are special characters for a set. So given we're going to remove square brackets, we will need to take that into account. There's also escapes that match certain things. So for example, we're going to be trying to remove square brackets with a number between them, and you'll notice here that /d for decimal or digit matches a Unicode character 0 to 9. Okay, so we're going to make use of some of that. The other thing we're going to make use of in here is these repetition characters. So the first one is, so there's one here, the asterisk. So that says that we can take any repetition of those characters, and plus, which says we can take one or more of those characters. Now I'll show what all that means in the actual code, but I'm just alerting to you where you can find those in the documentation. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to match things that look like that, or maybe like that, or maybe like that. So when we think about regular expressions, we think, what do they all have in common? Well, what all these things have in common is they have square brackets. Within that square brackets is one or more numbers, and there's nothing else in there. Okay, so square brackets followed by some number of digits followed by a closing square bracket. Okay, and the references exactly match that, and there's nothing else in there that matches that. So they're two important things. We need to uniquely identify the things that we're going to want to remove. So we need to think about a regular expression, so it's equally important that it matches all the things that we want to remove, as it is that it doesn't match any of the things that we don't want to remove, so we don't accidentally remove anything. So what this regular expression is going to look like, well, firstly, as I mentioned, so the first thing we want to match is this left-hand square bracket. Now, the left-hand square bracket has a special meaning in the regular expression language, which is that it's the start of a set of things that I can match against. So we don't want it to mean that, we want it to mean an actual square bracket. So the way we do that is we precede it by a backslash, or we call that escaping it. And what that means is we don't want it to have its meaning in the language, we want the literal meaning, which is a left-hand square bracket. The next thing is we've got one or more of these digits. Okay, if we look at the documentation, as we did a minute ago, we can see that /d is a special character that represents a decimal digit. And we also saw that plus meant that you could have one or more of these things. So if we do /d plus, that means /d is a digit, and it will match any string which has one or more digit in it. Okay, if we did a star instead of a plus, it would be 0 or more. But in this case, there's always going to be one digit in that square brackets. So this here is our regular expression code. Okay, now I don't expect you to remember, you need to spend a bit of time playing with that language and look at documentations and things to practice the regular expressions. But hopefully there's enough there that you can sort of get a concept of what's happening. Okay, so we're saying we want to match anything that's in this form with square brackets and one or more digits. Okay, square bracket has a special meaning, so we're going to escape it with a backslash to say that we don't want the special meaning, we actually want a real square bracket. Okay, then we're saying in this middle part here, /d is a digit and plus means one or more of those, so we're going to have one or more digits. And then again, we want an actual literal closing square bracket. Okay, so that's our regular expression, and that's going to match all of those references in the file. So let's look at how we do that. So first we're going to import that regular expression library, and then I'm going to do it using, in this case, a list comprehension. Okay. So remember our list comprehensions, we say what we want for the variable that we're going to pick out, what it's being picked out of, and then also potentially we could have a conditional statement at the end, but we don't need one here. Okay, so the thing that we want to keep, so line is the variable that we're going to pick out, so line in prizes is going to pick out a one of those sublists, or one of those strings. We've got a list of prizes, list of strings. And then what we want to do is, so this bit here tells us what we're going to collect up in our new list. Okay, so what are we going to connect up? Well, sub is a method of RE, or regular expression, that does a substitution. Okay, so we're going to substitute something in place of something else in our line, which is our string. Okay, so the first argument here is the thing that we want to find and substitute. And so that's our regular expression. So the regular expression is passed as a string, okay, and that tells us that we want to find anything that looks like this: square bracket, some number of digits, at least one, and a square bracket. If we find one of those, we're going to substitute just the empty string here, okay, and so we're going to do that for each line in prizes. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so there we are again. We've printed out prizes, which is our list of strings, but you can see that those references have all been removed, or they've all been substituted or replaced with an empty list. Okay, so regular expressions are very handy, and they're quite a nice, concise way of doing things. And you may recall when we were reading in data in some of the earlier case studies, and we wanted to check whether the thing we were going to read in was numerical. I think it was when we were trying to do conversions, for example. So we want all the things in that field, we wanted to convert them to an integer or to a float if they were actually a number, whereas if they were some missing data, like a dash or something, or if it was part of the header and it wasn't a number, then we didn't want to do it. And you'll remember we looked at the first character and we asked whether it was a numerical character. And I said at the time that that's not a particularly good way of doing it. You know, you could have, potentially you could have some other kind of word that starts with a number, or something for missing data or something. So what you really want to do is be more exacting about what sort of things you'll accept for that conversion, and regular expressions will allow you to do that. So that's really the right way to, or one of the right ways. We also saw how to do it using exceptions, where you actually try the conversion and catch the exception, which is another way of doing it. So what else have we got there? Well, we've got a couple of these things like world. So we're going to remove those. In fact, we've got world and we've got Europe. So again, I'm just using a list comprehension to strip those out. Okay, so I've done a list comprehension here. This time I have got a conditional statement, which is if not world is in line or Europe is in line, then I'm going to keep that line. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, again, is using a regular expression. So I'll show you an example of that. This is our regular expression bit here. Okay, so what have we done this time? Well, we've said, so instead of sub, for substitute, we're using search. So we're just finding something. It's a bit like strings find method, but more versatile. Okay, the thing we're going to find is the regular expression, which again is a string. And this time we're going to use, as part of our regular expression, the OR symbol. That vertical bar is an OR. Okay, so this says that if we have something that matches world, or we have something that matches Europe, then this within the line, then this search will be true, and if it's not true, then we'll keep that line. Okay, so that's another way to do it, and you'll see that we get the same output there. I have just said there the pros and cons. This way is actually, I mean, if it's got an advantage is that it reads quite well. It's fairly simple to read, that one. Regular expressions, their disadvantage is that they can get quite complex. And if you're debugging the code, it can be quite difficult to see what it's going to match with. That's not so much the case here or in that previous one. They're quite short, but regular expressions can be really quite complex. The advantage with the regular expression is you get a lot of control over what you're matching against. You can be very specific about what you want to match. Okay, so that's regular expressions. There is, I did mention earlier there's some white space in there still, but we're going to assume that we don't, in fact we can see a little bit of it there, but we're going to assume for the moment that we haven't noticed that, and then we'll strip it out in a moment. So this time we're going to create our data frame using a constructor. Remember last time we used the input-output methods. This time we're going to use a constructor. So if we have a look at our API again, and we look at data frame, and there's the constructor. So you'll see that there's a number of different ways that you can construct a data frame. You can do it from a NumPy array, iterable, a dict, or a data frame. An iterable is a list, and that's what we're going to do in this case. List is an iterable. In this case, we're going to construct it from a list. And we also want to have our columns labeled. So the default is that columns will just be numbered. So we need to tell the constructor that we want the columns labeled, and we're going to do that using a list as well. So let's go back and look at our code. So here we are. So we're going to call the constructor. Okay. Our data is going to be, so this bit here defines our data, and we're going to construct that from a list of lists. Okay, so here we've got a list of strings, and we want to split those strings, each of those strings, into a list, and we can do that. We know that we can do that just by using the split method, which is the method of the string, and we can split on the tab character. Okay, so again, this is another example of a little list comprehension in here, which just takes our list of strings and converts it to a list of lists by splitting it on the tabs. And it does that for all except for the 0th row. Okay, the 0th row we want to use for our column headings. Okay, so our columns is going to be same kind of idea. The 0th row here, which is a string, and we split it on tabs in order to get a list which becomes our line of headers. So let's give that a go. Okay, so that's worked out for us. We can see that it's split it into all the things which are in the rank in the table, which was the ranking of Nobel laureates per 10 million people. Then we've got the entity, which is a country or an island or the like, number of Nobel laureates, the population in 2018. These were actually taken, these data were collected this year, but they had 2018 data at the time. I think they've got 2019 there now. And the laureates per 10 million. We can see that there is some new line symbols in here, which we hadn't taken out. And there's some other white space in there as well. So that's something always to be careful of, because when you're trying to match things up later, if you've got white space hidden in there that you don't know about, then it's going to cause the code to fail. Okay, so in fact here there's also a, we can see it up in some of our other, you can see it up here, that there's also this space in here that shouldn't be there, and in one case there's an extra space there as well. So we don't actually see those in here, so that's something to be cautious about. Okay, so that's creating the data frame, reading in the data from a file, and cleaning the data using regular expressions. So next we'll take a look at selection and also masking within data frames.